I'm actually referring to as re-indigenization.
Just to let everyone know,
okay,
Lloyd, we're now recording and we are live. And so Lloyd, I would ask you to take this as the opportunity. I'm sharing my screen. You should see the Global Unity Business Group on your screen, I hope.
Yes.
So Lloyd, consider yourself to be the anchor of this, and please take the opportunity to introduce yourself, say your name clearly, etc., and then introduce what the Global Unity Business Group is, and then proceed to, if you could be so kind as to read the introduction that you've already typed up, so that people's viewing will have an idea of where we're here, and then we can open it up to whatever we decide to do. But if you'd be so kind.
Yes, okay, of course. So the Global Unity Business Group essentially is a humanitarian enterprise, global sustainable development corporation.
Lloyd,
yes.
First, introduce yourself. What is your name?
Okay,
Who are you? Take this as no one knows anything about anything that's happening, right? So as a matter of fact, to refresh your mind, go back to your email and look under your signature and introduce yourself and the various groups that you represent. And then read the email that you sent out to everyone, so we'll know what we're doing here, please.
Right.
All right, take two.
Take two. Well, let me see. I don't have my email, let's say, signature in front of me. That's not something that I have on my desktop because I had to close my email earlier. But I am the 5 Points Youth Foundation Global Goodwill Ambassador for Canada, the Francophonie, the Commonwealth of Nations, and Turtle Island. And so I have been involved with a company called AHIABGA University in Manhattan, New York, for the past couple of years. We've been trying to develop some food related solutions, what we call climate smart, local. And so the working group that I had created some time ago, called the Community Sustainability Working Group, was actually created under an organization called Science for Peace a few years back. And so I've been involved in that organization through Science for Peace as well, to support the relocalization of our food and food sovereignty. And so, and we came up with this concept of climate smart food, where the concept is essentially around trying to create a new food system, essentially that can sequester carbon and helpfully reduce carbon in the atmosphere through processes, regenerative processes that increase soil carbon. And actually, the idea being this concept called drawdown, where we can actually reverse climate change by pulling that carbon out of the air and putting it back into the earth. We called it reverse carbon mining when we first started out with the Biochar initiatives many years ago. So I was president of Biochar Ontario at that time. When I first got introduced to AHIABGA University, we were focused on biochar. We were creating the Canadian Biochar Initiative. This concept was fairly well discussed within biochar initiatives globally. But what we wanted to do was leverage the food system and local food systems to actually try to do something to see if we could actually reverse climate change. But then we came up with this climate smart food program that also incorporated actions by the producers of this climate smart food to actually implement the Sustainable Development Goals locally. what we call globalization. So thinking globally, acting locally. And so I've been involved through, again, this community sustainability working group to create an organization called Drawdown Markham locally, which is a local civil society organization. Here where I live, I had been involved initially with Drawdown Toronto, Drawdown Caledon, two organizations that are in the Greater Toronto area. And they started these drawdown initiatives. And so I created the local initiative here. Eventually, we developed this partnership between Energy University and another organization called We the World in New York as well, and Global Cooperation Day, which was originally in New Zealand. And so this We Energime Global Cooperation Turtle Island became an international civil society organization. So the local civil society organization we created, Drawdown Markham, partnered with this international civil society organization, which had a mandate essentially to educate people about life value. And so the life value peace education tied in with the Science for Peace organization that I had been involved with, where we're essentially trying to educate our youth, especially youth educators and decision makers, about this concept of life value, where life value is what we would like people to focus on rather than money value as the purpose of our existence as human beings. So life being more important than money. So we partnered with We Energime Global Cooperation. We began building our local network as we also expanded to create these global networks, or starting with regional networks. But we had a collaborative exchange program that we created through Drawdown Markham, where we connected a bunch of organizations. Of course, with the We Energime Global Cooperation Turtle Island organization, there were international connections everywhere that we were establishing. We were learning from others about what we could do locally in our own community, and other people were hopefully learning from us as well. So this was an international exchange and collaboration to look at how we can actually implement solutions locally to issues, to problems, to both local problems as well as global problems. So this was our journey as we've been creating these organizations, these networks. I eventually did connect with Andrew and the 5 Points Youth Foundation in Los Angeles as a member of the We Energime Global Cooperation Turtle Island International Civil Society Organization. We ended up sort of partnering on a few things. We did last year a Sunlight Spectacle event on June 21st with our friends in Bermuda. We had planted a tree of peace and reconciliation here in September 2019, and that was used as a model for doing a similar thing in Bermuda. We ended up planting 3 of these trees here in the Greater Toronto area, one on federal lands in Pickering, Ontario, another one on private property in Scarborough, which is part of Toronto, and a third one in St. Jamestown, Toronto, which tied us into sort of the story of the Jamestown, Virginia in US and the slave trade, and that story that's being told of the connection across the Atlantic to Africa and the origins of the human species, in fact. And so what we're trying to do, and what we have been trying to do also with our friends in Drawdown Toronto, for instance, who work closely or try to work closely as possible with the Indigenous community and processes of re-indigenization. So this is where we're extending that now into these conversations with the Indigenous communities, not just here in North America, but hopefully now around the world. And so to take this as the next step on our journey, we are coming together, I think, at this point to try to have dialogues and conversations around this idea of globalization and this idea of re-indigenization, and to make it a strength-based network that works to try to create the strength of an organization such as my ambassadorship to Canada, Canada being a country, a corporation, and with as well these large organizations that have existed for many decades, like the Commonwealth of Nations, like the Francophonie. These are my ambassadorship to those two organizations, which have existed for a long time before I was born, but are networked around the world and have this enormous cultural presence as well as an enormous economic presence. So the idea being that if we can unite the global indigenous communities, not just across Turtle Island, which is commonly thought of as North America, Canada, US, Mexico, but also the Caribbean, and potentially Central America, South America, possibly. Some people consider that as well as an extension of Turtle Island. But to unite all of the indigenous communities around the world, also in Africa, also in Asia, to come together and create an organization of their own making that has the clout, the power to, the economic power and the political power to have this presence that could be of equal or even similar type of influence as these existing organizations that are essentially the monarchs and the oligarchs of the world who are having these organizations that have tremendous influence over our lives individually and collectively. So this event really is actually a I guess you could say an event that's being hosted by the Global Unity Business Group, which was recently created. We did not incorporate under the laws of Canada yet. We're holding back on that, but we may. But what we're trying to do is essentially have a conversation for this next year, I guess you could say, and try to come up with ways of making this conversation something that Indigenous people around the world are having. So we have invited various Indigenous people initially here on Turtle Island, which, like I said, includes Canada, US, Mexico, the Caribbean, Latin America. And this is a discussion about this sort of grand experiment of colonialism and the possible pathways for unified decolonialism or decolonization of our local communities, so that we can collectively and creatively evolve and develop solutions to the problems we're facing, of course, including climate change, and possibilities, pathways to really, as the 21st century unfolds, where individuals, leaders, governments, businesses, corporations, community organizations, and people like us can start to come together and address some of these challenges, to adapt society to live within Earth's limits, I guess you could say, because that's something that's not being acknowledged well enough in our education system. All the talk today now is around growth, economic growth, but at the expense of, and it always seems to be at the expense of, usually it's at the expense of the earth and people, rather than focusing on the wellness of planet Earth and the wellness of people and the health of Earth and people as the priority and the number one. This is life value. So life value, if we can assign life value as greater than, or create an understanding that life value is more important and greater than the money value that we're always seeking to create in our own lives, in our corporate lives, rather than trying to seek out the life value that really is the basis for our existence, and without which we wouldn't even exist. So this is a conversation we're trying to have here as we develop the learning network, which we're hoping to create a unified educators network that will start to teach these values to our children, and to the leaders who are guiding our nations as they exist today.
Well, thank you, Lloyd.
So
what I'll do,
that's my main intro.
well, thank you so much, Lloyd. I'm going to actually read the introduction that you provided here. Give me just 1 second. I'm going to bring back the Global Unity image so you can. Oh, I may not be able to do that. All right, so I'll go ahead. I'm going to change this to gallery view, so we'll see that we have quite a collection of people here. We'll be introducing ourselves shortly, but let me unhide myself. I'm Andrew Williams Jr., and thank you all for joining us. As you may see, this event is being hosted by TRN.TV, the Revelation Network. You can go to that link to see it, but also by the edfufoundation.org, edfufoundation.org. And it's based, as I mentioned, in near Oakland, California. But today's event is a Sunlight Spectacle 2021 Indigenous Global Summit. And I'm just going to read this introduction, Lloyd, that you already put together. And basically, you're saying that the Sunlight Spectacle 2021 Indigenous Global Unity Summit is an event that takes place starting today. Today is June the 10th, I believe. And it's the first in a series of events and dialogues that will take place every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for nearly a year, up until May 25th, 2022, which is Africa Unity Day, where over 3,000 indigenous tribes are expected to gather from across the African continent and from around the world in order to discuss the Sustainable Development Agenda as it relates to the African Continental Free Trade Area, the Prosper Africa Initiative, the United Nations Global Compact 2021 through 2023 strategy, and Decade of Action to deliver the Sustainable Development Goals, the African Union Agenda 2063, and the future of the MDGs beyond 2030. MDG referring to the Millennium Development Goals, the original 1,000-year plan for achieving peace on Earth through a fundamental transformation of humanity from Homo Confligiere to Homo Amore Universalis. Note some of the biggest and most important questions to human history are being asked right now in regard to where are we going and how do we get there? We collectively, as a single human species on planet Earth, which is still the only known planet in the universe that is known to support life. So that is, in fact, the official introduction of what we're doing here. And again, as your host, I'm Andrew Williams Jr., and I am the president of 5 Points Youth Foundation. Lloyd mentioned earlier that he's one of our Goodwill ambassadors for what we've termed AHIABGA, the Ad Hoc International Advisory Board of Goodwill Ambassadors. And this was formed as a continuation of 100 Goodwill ambassadors that were recruited back in 2015 when we launched the 5-year campaign, 2015 through 2020, both based on the United Nations Global Compact, Caring for Climate Initiative. Now, I myself do not condone, support, or even like all or even most of the policies that are implemented by the United Nations, but I do recognize it as the largest global organization representing most of the countries on Earth. But from an indigenous standpoint, we have to find a way to connect the royal, indigenous, tribal, and what Lloyd calls the interfaith, neighborhood, and business collaboratives together to address these issues. We're also, as I mentioned, streaming this on Facebook. That's streaming to the Encounter AHIABGA network, and all are invited to join there. Encounter itself was formed back in 2012 here in Los Angeles, originally as a community advisory board and think tank for Professor Marcela Oliva's Architectural and Environmental Design Department at the Trade Tech Community College here in Los Angeles. So this is actually a continuation of that same format. So now I'd like for the people that are here to take 2 minutes, if you would, and briefly introduce yourselves and begin with your name, of course, and if you have a social media handle where people can reach you, and then a description of your organization or your project. And so with that, ladies first, please, I'll turn the floor over to whichever of you ladies chooses to introduce yourselves first. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Prince. I'll go first. I guess I'm the only lady. Okay, there's Tasnim as well. Okay, Tasmin, please permit me go first. My name is Hafula Chibeme. I am the founder and president of the Agripreneurs, the Association of Agripreneurs for Development. This association the idea of the creation of this association came into place through my experience as a trainer of agricultural entrepreneurs back in my country, Cameroon, where we trained agricultural entrepreneurs and they didn't have the necessary capital to start off their businesses. So they ended up not getting into business. My colleagues and I saw that as an opportunity to pool resources and support these youths so that they are not idle or keep waiting for the government in vain. And so we've been, registered it in Canada in 2018. And we are working on the projects of about 10 youths back in Cameroon at this time. Here in Canada, I am pleased to join forces with Lloyd and some of his other colleagues, and we are looking forward to promoting climate smart victory gardens, kitchens, and education platform to promote the climate change agenda. So that's it about me. If you want to check out, currently our website is under production. We are still doing a lot of construction on our website, but you can always check out to see if it is ready for you to view at agrifordev.org. We are equally on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, agrifordev.org. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. If you could be so kind in the chat, if you could type in your information about those organizations. And if you so choose, you may also type in your contact information.
Okay.
I'm doing that right now for Lloyd. So Tasmin, greetings. Take the floor, please.
Greetings. Thank you everybody for being here. I am here by virtue of being connected with Lloyd. And I got connected with him basically by chance. If anybody wants to know whether one man can make a difference, I'm that one man who is making a difference. I've been seeing things happening in my around me, and I just do the little things that I can. You know, plant a few trees and plant my own vegetables, recycle. So I guess that's what attracted, you know, like minds get attracted to like-minded people. And that's why I'm here. And I'm here to serve Lloyd's cause. I believe in what he's doing, especially biochar. It's the natural way that Mother Earth needs to replenish. It's been happening for centuries since Mother Earth was created. And he's just trying to promote that. And I'm with him on that. I'm with him on the Victory Gardens and the Bubble Festival. I'm helping with that. So that's why I'm here. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Also, as I said, please feel free in the chat to type in any information that you'd like about yourself or contact and your organization. So Kevin, you were one of the first people here. So if you could show your video and introduce yourself, Kevin, we'd appreciate that. If you can hear me.
My video has been disabled.
Oh, let me change that just a minute. Yeah, we saw you. Just a moment. Let me go back over here to Zoom, and I lost the screen. Just a minute here. Participants. Kevin Moore asked to start video. Hopefully you're able now to show your video.
Yes, there. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello there. My name is Kevin, and I am here today. My first visit. I met Lloyd through a biochar in a discussion. I recall now that that's where we met, was through biochar and the discussion about biochar. My interest, my passion is within Indigenous rights and building bridges between Indigenous, non-Indigenous, like-minded individuals that are concerned about Indigenous rights and global climate change. I have been doing this for several years now, and recently started as a settler allied correspondent for an Indigenous owned media company that is a very small team, starting of Mohawk run from Tyendinaga Mohawk territory in Eastern Ontario. I have done only one correspondent role, and that was last weekend within my community, where there is a sewage treatment facility scheduled and planned for construction on a Southern Ontario's last cold water hatchery for brook trout. And it's been through my recent interaction with the local community talking about this project that I've been able to uncover that our municipal government has actively sidestepped correspondence or inclusion processes within the Indigenous community and this project. So this is really timely in that in Canada, there is a very large growing narrative about pipeline projects and infrastructure projects happening in the west of Canada that is being talked about around the world in the pipelines and the oil sands projects and such. So what I've been doing as part of the Credible Mohawk Entertainment is I've been talking about connecting the narrative of climate change with colonialism and the negative byproducts of the colonial that that's been my primary focus for the last handful of months. And I am very excited to be able to represent the bridge building concept between non-Indigenous activism and Indigenous activism. And so that's what I represent here today. And I look forward to building contact patches within what this team here will be developing as. And I hope to engage as deeply as possible. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And as
Could
I
I
said,
say just a few follow-up comments on
course.
that as well? I
Yes.
just also want to mention that not only is there a conversation going on with regard to the pipeline, because that was news just yesterday, that the Keystone XL pipeline, the main developer, has pulled out of those projects, but also the recent headlines also as well, and James Shanks may be talking about this as well, but the scandals around the missing and murdered Indigenous women and children, and the recent discovery of the 215 bodies at a former residential school, and the number of the requests that are being made, I guess, the number of dead children, and the requests that's been made of the Catholic Church and the Pope with regard to that issue, which is also very large, at least in Canada right now.
well, thanks, Lloyd. Perhaps we could revisit that after we go through the introductions. And James, you'll be the last person introduced because you're actually the star of the show, so to speak. But if there's anyone else that would like to introduce yourselves, now's that time.
I did notice Mariam came in on the call, so if it's ladies first.
Greetings, Mariam.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
Well, now that you're here, we're all fantastic. Please introduce yourself, Mariam, and take a few moments to introduce your various organizations, if you would be so kind. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Mariam Khan, Executive Director, Community Development Foundation, also founder and Vice President of Global Women's Development Network, and also running a big initiative under the CDF umbrella of Women's Economic Development Initiative, Punjab. Punjab is one of the biggest province of Pakistan, and it's with a larger population. And we are majorly focusing on women's economic empowerment under our all initiatives. And we are also heading the chain of International Women's International Day for the conferences till 2030. So the overall working aim is to promote women's presence in all levels, and also develop their economic conditions at all levels, starting from the grassroots till managerial sort of jobs and working. We are focusing under our agenda program. Recently, Global Women's Development Network was established after our 2021 conference of International Women's Day. And now this is and it's a registered platform with the name of Global Women's Development Network, as a non-profit organization working for the women's economic empowerment and women's development. So we are soon going to open our upcoming conference agenda and planning sessions with different countries with the name of Exploring Sustainable Development Goals. And second theme of the conference is Sustainable Development Goals and the Woman. So this is all from Community Development Foundation and from my side. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Mariam. Again, if you can type in to the chat your contact information and any websites you would like us to refer to.
Okay, sir.
I'm copying the information we put into the chat onto the Facebook page as well. So everyone that visits it will be able to follow up. Thank you so much, Miriam.
Thank you, sir.
Again, a very quick comment, just to sort of tie in current events before I forget. From what Mariam has just mentioned, today is the first day of the G7 summit in the UK. I heard that on the radio this morning as I drove my wife into work on CBC radio. They were saying that one of the very important focus points of the G7 summit this time that's happening now is inclusion of women into the global economy, and that was one of the very high priority items of discussion that's taking place at the G7 summit, along with climate change.
Okay, well, thank you so very much, Lloyd. Looks as though we do have other participants here that are male. Let's see here. I'll just go down the list and see the first male I see. James, let's see, Miriam. I think, oh, James, it looks as though you're next up. James Shanks, are you there?
Ani?
Hi there, welcome, James.
I was listening to Kevin's speak, and he spoke about fisheries and such, the Akwesasne, the Mohawks. Early 90s, there was a young man that got a grant from Indian Affairs to put together a fishery. See, the idea is that they give grants out knowing that we'd fail. Well, he didn't. He was actually able to make it a thriving business. Well, along comes Canada and says, well, we'd like you to speak to different nations, especially South America, on fishing and how to develop such hatcheries. So they had him bouncing all over the place and making him an ambassador, so to speak. And in the interim, he was neglecting his own place. And he would say, I can't make the trip because of, as well, you know, we're giving you so much money to make this trip, you know, you have to go. In other words, forced down an alley he didn't want to go down. The whole thing fell apart. Now, if they let him alone, it'd be thriving today. So, global sustainability. Nothing in the books can be used. We all know about the banksters. We all know about politicians. We can talk till the ears turn red, but doing is another thing altogether. Lloyd spoke about an organization that's not incorporated yet. Well, the incorrect word was yet. You can't incorporate. I started an organization called ATF many years ago, back in the 90s. It stood for Aboriginal Tobacco Fuel. In 2015 or so, I changed that to a new true nation, or a new true family, excuse me. Because we got involved in more things than just tobacco and fuel. And for those years, attempting to make strides whereby the so-called Canadian or provincial worlds, and especially Ontario and Quebec in particular, to work with our peoples, fell on deaf ears. See, they don't want us to work with them. They want us dead. I won't mix my words, okay? I don't speak politically correct, but I will tell the truth. There's nothing here in the so-called Canada that invites us to participate in anything other than complete surrender or die. Now, what's this tree Lloyd's talking about? Your tree, what's it called? I'm asking you a question, Lloyd.
Yeah, no,
Lloyd?
I just had to unmute. That's the tree of peace and reconciliation that we had planted.
Thank you. Peace and reconciliation. And Lloyd and I had a conversation yesterday, and I applauded him for such a title, because amongst ourselves and people of like minds, okay, it is a very big step forward, reconciliation, okay? The healing process. When you talk about reconciliation in terms of Canadian politics, it falls on deaf ears. There is no reconciliation. There is no reconciliation. This idea of exposing 215 skeletons, remains, people from like the Royal Bank of Canada, expressing indignity and stuff. Oh my, this is terrible. They're the ones that finance the wars across the world. What do they care about 215? As far as Canada's concerned, we're dogs. Until 2011, a dog had more rights than an Indian in Canada. So when they talk about all this peace and unity and such, it's going nowhere. The reconciliation process in Canada is, how do we get rid of them? How do we stop them from growing? Well, you can't. Okay, we're stronger and bigger than we have ever been. Unfortunately, a lot of our people have given in to the Canadian way. That we can't prevent. The 215 children that they said were killed, Kevin Annette, that's A-N-N-E-T, I think, some 25 years ago, blew the whistle. And he's been actively against it now for 25 years. And many times he's been called a kook, something not to be listened to. And now they're talking about these children. Well, people, there aren't 215 souls dead. There are over 50,000 of our children. I'm going to skip a bit here and go to the COVID idea. Go to your Google and look for the 30,000 Indian blankets. Yes, 30,000 blankets were distributed to our peoples here. They were laced with smallpox. 10 million of our peoples died in a very short while. That was extermination. And now they're giving out vaccines, not just to Indigenous people, but to all of us. What does that mean to me? It means, look at the term ivermectin as a possible solution, not the COVID injections. Going back to my people, there has never been a century or a decade where governments have not attempted to pull us apart. We have a structure called band councils. I will not try to mix up too many of these topics because things can be confusing if you put too much into one display. So myself, for now, I'm just saying, basically, for the past 30 years, I've been attempting to create economic rapport between other nations and ourselves, excluding Canada, excluding the states, excluding their provinces and states. I've been to Africa, I've been to Libya, I've been to Syria, I've been to Iraq, Iran, all the vacation spots. And I've been to England. And I'd rather sit down in Erbil having tea with someone than having a fancy meal in London. That tells you what I think of the locations. So I'll let you go for now. Thank you.
Okay, Jim. Well, we set aside 2 hours every week to do whatever we choose to and to have conversations that are relevant to the Indigenous people and to the world for that matter. So thank you for what you're sharing. I'm here, as I said, in Los Angeles, California, but I was born in Macon, Georgia in 1958. And I survived an abortion attempt by my mother because she didn't want me to be born into the world that she had to live in. And that here in the United States, unfortunately, that's true of most people that, like you, are targets for genocide and extermination. So I do feel very integrally what it is you're expressing. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for being here. So I'll open up the floor for general discussions. If there's any comments, now's that time.
It looks like we have one other person, Odell Hall, who has not introduced themselves.
Yes, greetings. I'm joining late and I couldn't use my video right now, but my name is Odell Hall. I live in Central Texas, and I'm personally involved in creating a community of equanimity. And I am considered to be a settler. So my personal endeavor is to consciously decolonize, become active, become useful, take direction, learn, and to help in all ways, what few skills I do have, to help a community to rework. We're going to have to work around these great power centers I see. And I am really encouraged by all of the comments, regardless their disparity of them, in how we're finding one another. And I'm invested in that. There will be ways that each community organizes itself to care for itself, but it's what we've always done. It's what the indigenous people have done miraculously today, but it's what they've mastered over tens of thousands of years. Their knowledge is what we need, in my opinion, to, I don't mean to just, be sappy, but to save the world, to save this planet, to save Mother Earth. I really believe that the sanity and the sovereignty of their ability to organize themselves as a people has been proven over time. So I'm here to learn about that and to extend my sincere offer of service in any way that I can. One of the side interests that I have with my group is the conversations to do with communities being able to create their own ability to market themselves to themselves, where there is no other person involved. Some of the technologies are out there today that can perhaps assist in some ways communities to fund themselves. There are a couple of groups out there. 214 Alpha is one that I know of. So as we engage in conversation, we may find utility in various topics. I'm so honored to be here, and I appreciate you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so very much. And again, please in the chat, if you type in your contact information and any organizations that you represent or choose to. This is, as you may have heard, the first of a series of events that we intend to hold on a weekly basis for at least the next year. And one of the sponsors here, TRN.TV, we do actually have a platform where we can choose to rebroadcast our content and build an audience for those that have an interest in engaging with us. So again, thank you so very much for joining us now. I'm here in Los Angeles, and one of the organizations I'm representing is the solacollective.com. We just had a global summit back on began on May 25th, the Kairos Summit. So we'll be actually providing opportunities to engage more than just through Zoom. We are also launching an Easy Expo platform. So the idea is that we can kind of build on our knowledge as we go forward and come out of this with an action plan. So hopefully you can start thinking about what we can plan to do together and ways that we can move this forward. Eventually, I would like to see us create this as a docu-reality series. And the idea would be that just like other reality series, right, we deal with real life issues facing us on a day-to-day basis. But hopefully this can become a forum where our children can see that we are all diverse and we're working together from our different places, but we're all working together. It's only what we show our children, not what we tell them, that's important. So let us be the ones to understand that we do have the global stage. And Mr. Shanks, I'm willing and able to help you move forward, whatever you have in mind. I just want to be able to make sure that we do it in such a way that it involves people from other places around the world. One of those places would be South Africa. One of the people that will be joining us will be Princess Seppi from the Biochar Federation. They're an indigenous group in South Africa. You may have heard recently that the Zulu kingdom unfortunately lost its king, and then shortly after that, their queen. They represent 12 million of their people in South Africa. The Biochar, having 2 million members, is the next largest group. So they're reaching out around the world to connect with indigenous people too, Jim. So hopefully we can find a way to connect together these nations from around the world, because we only have one planet, we only have one people, so we have to find a way to work together ourselves.
That
So
would be very, very good. Yeah.
okay, Lloyd, I'll turn it back over to you. We have another hour left, or how long you choose to run it.
Well, I didn't have any specific other agenda items at this point in time, because what I wanted to do was open up this as a dialogue that followed on from last year's Sunlight Spectacle event. So last year's Sunlight Spectacle event was much more of a what we call edutainment event, where we actually had people singing, people playing music, and it was more of a fun event, I guess. So we had singers that came in, and so we could turn this as well into that type of thing as we move forward in the year and have these weekly meetings as well. So Jim, you wanted to say something?
Thanks, Lloyd. Since you have an hour left, okay, I like to work with facts and keep the information short, because as you see, I use very powerful words, okay, very direct words to make my point. When it comes to, they say, indigenous peoples and such, okay, we're the peoples of the lands. Myself, I come from what's known as the Anishinaabe, okay. I'm part of the Three Fires Confederacy, which was the Dawa, Potawatomi, and the Chippewa. There are many different confederacies. The other one is called the Iroquois Confederacy, as opposed to the Iroquois Nation. The Iroquois Confederacy was made up of 5 nations, okay, of which the Mohawk were part of it. A few points that I'm glad you're recording this, because now it can be put down in factual form, and you have its source coming to you directly. A couple of points I want to make. One, treaties. There are several so-called treaties that were signed. You see, in the States, there was no treaty. It was conquered. The natives there were conquered. Of course, 10 million of them died with smallpox. It wasn't hard to conquer it after that. But up here in the area known as Canada, because that's not the real name, then they decided to attempt to assimilate us by treaty. Well, the only treaty that was ever made, okay, you can go back to Queen Anne, and then after that, King George III, who upgraded because of our assistance against the Americans and the Brits and such. They needed us. They needed us badly to survive. So the Royal Proclamation was created. And as a royal decree, as a royal proclamation, it cannot be changed by any successive monarch. It can be added to, but you cannot diminish it. And every so-called treaty after that has made an attempt, or has attempted, or has, in fact, diminished the true meaning of that proclamation made back then, which means that none of them are valid. All these treaties, and I did my research on Treaty 5 and 6, for example, and the reason they got their treaty, well, they starved our people for two winters. So it's either die of starvation or sign the paper. That's a nice treaty, okay? Isn't that called duress? Now, they brought in a thing called the Indian Act. Well, before that, there used to be a thing called Indian agents. And then a lot of American people would remember about that, American history. The white men went into the areas and they traded with the Indians, and they dictated, so to speak, the terms. Well, up here in so-called Canada, the Indian agents were replaced by band councils. So when you talk about Ottawa making contracts or agreements with this band council or that band council, as I've told you before, Lloyd, whenever Ottawa or its provinces signs any kind of agreement with a band council, in this case, the trustee is Trudeau. He's sitting in that chair right now. So he's got a pen in his right hand and he's got a pen in his left hand, and he's signing for both sides. Because the band council is simply an employee of the trustee. They are not Indians. They do not represent the Indians. The Assembly of First Nations, the AFN, the great savior, started out as the White Roots of Peace, okay? And then, again, another tree. And it came from the Manitoba area. I knew the originators back then. Yes, I'm that old. And they had an idea to try to bridge between the colonial and the Aboriginal, which followed the two-row wampum idea. Stay in your ship, and we stay on our canoe, and we'll sail the waters together. Well, a lot of them jumped ship. Later on, a lot of our people jumped canoe too, it's true. But it was supposed to be a way for us to communicate, to try to solve the issue of language barriers, because communication is the greatest tool or the greatest weapon. And not having the same language is difficult. So the idea came from a well-founded thought. But now the AFN is nothing more than a corporate slave to Canada. And again, it doesn't represent Indians at all. Nothing to do with Indians. All about corporate. I mean, the Grand Chief, okay, of the AFN, he has a tax-free income of what, between 90 and 130,000 a year, plus all the perks. All he has to do is sign a few papers, make a few speeches, and he goes home every week with a paycheck. That's corporate. That's not Indian. So there is a situation there. When it comes to welfare, for example, they talk about Indians getting welfare, and it's tax money from Canadians' pockets. Not one dime of Canada's taxpayers goes into any payments made to our peoples. Not a single dime. It all comes from the Indian Trust Fund, which was set up in 1763. But your governments won't say that to you because they like the idea of having your people angry at our people for taking your money. Again, division. When it comes to information concerning education, you have all these universities purporting. I remember back in the early 90s I attempted to get some of the people from, it was called Concordia University back then, to come into Kahnawake to teach university level courses. Well, that wasn't going to happen. I said, have them come out to us. I said, well, we're not going to, because after 1990, our people are afraid to go into your world, and they're blowing your universities. They're afraid for their safety. Well, some years later, somebody got a funding for it through university, and now you have a whole Indigenous department in Concordia University built on what I had talked about way back in the early 90s. But it doesn't teach Indigenous information. It teaches how to be a good Canadian. But the money flows into the university, boy, I'll tell you. It flows in there every year. And they sit down, they kiss the, well, I'm not going to say what it is, of the great white master. Okay, I say white, I'm white too in a sense, okay? I'm actually Chippewa and Scottish. So I like a party, but I'm cheap. That's supposed to be funny for it. Anyways, the thing is that there is nothing being told to Canadians that's true. This whole thing with COVID is a way to control the world, and many know that. Many won't speak it though. It's control. It's political and military control using a bioweapon. They did this with our peoples, the 30,000 blankets. They've done it even up to today with bad water to our communities. And once it's found out, oh, we have to fix it. We have to give them better water. So they'll do that for 2 or 3 years and go back to the old system. Why? We want you dead. The woman that died in the hospital because the nurses told them to basically, don't bother us. And she videotaped herself. That's not uncommon. What's the difference between that and the 215 that they found in that gravesite? Nothing. It's the same mindset. As long as that mindset is there, there will be no change. So as my uncle would say, hang them all. Everyone that wants to create these problems, just hang them. And leave the real people live. And my uncle was kind of abrupt as well. I think it's probably where I got it from. But and he had another expression he used to say is shoot the bastard. Yeah, excuse me for the language, okay. But when he said that, it was like, smack him on the back of the head. It was a play on words. But to say that today, they'd want to throw you in jail because, oh, you're going to shoot this. We've lost humanity. You're trying to get it back, okay? And a lot of people are doing a good job. And money is not the God. Money is, as you said before, is a tool. And I agree with you. It's a tool. Our peoples, I see Kevin's back. Our peoples need new direction. There was a person that came on Facebook recently or YouTube, Romano, something. She wants to be Canada's new prime minister. I can't find information on her. So is she real or is she a digitally produced construct by the side that we're fighting against to try and lead us into something else away from the truth? This conciliation thing about the Indigenous women is full of malarkey. If I had, that was $27 million, I think was spent on it. I'm not sure, but even 10 million, for example, I'd have a whole row of people lined up who created the crimes. But not one individual has been incriminated from that so-called investigation. Not one woman or girl or child has been found through that investigation. But the Indians, as they call themselves, the First Nations, the people of the land who were part of it, they had great dinners and parties. They got salaries. It was a free handout, and Ottawa knew that. That's why they delayed the results over 2 years They didn't have any results to give. They tried to find it. There was no sincerity in there. It was rhetoric. How to extract more money from the Indians Trust Fund for fruitless endeavors. They would never put me on a situation like that where I have to find things, because you know what? I'd find them. And there are many like me that would find them. But we can't be part of it because we'd actually have results. They don't want that. When it comes to reservations were supposed to be that when a person turned 18, when a man turned 18, he was given a 1/4 acre of land and a home. That was part of the discussion. That was supposed to be part of the treaty, the initial treaty. Well, you can't give a man a 1/4 acre of land if there's no land to give. You see, as they force the people on the reserves to leave the reserve, that portion of the reserve gets eaten up by their surrounding non-native communities, making the reservation smaller and smaller and smaller. You don't know that. Nobody knows that. Or those that do are as old as I am, or they don't want to tell you. So to repopulate the reservations, would the land grow? Oh God, we can't have that. We can't give it back to them. Indians own their own land no matter where they are. Doesn't matter if we're in a city or in a countryside or on a reservation. If an Indian is on the land, it is his land, point final. That was the agreement, the decree by Queen Anne. And that was reiterated by King George III. But today, you have to pay us taxes. Why? You owe me money. You paid me nothing. Why am I paying you anything? No, you got your accounting all wrong. Turn your book around. So those are the topics I could develop on with you, okay? Trade, yes. I talked about a few countries I've been to. And I've done that not because I'm trying to impress, that's not the idea, but because I know that the people in those nations are just the same as us. They love, they live, they work, they have families, they have concerns. So all of this together with an organization like you've got here now will make a change, okay? And that's why I've been listening to you for quite some time. I just haven't done anything because I like to listen first. So I let this go back to anyone who wants to talk because I've taken enough of your time. Thank you.
Well, it's very valuable time, Jim, and I really do appreciate it. Thank you. Miriam Khan, you had you wanted to make a comment, Miriam?
Yes, sir. And also, I put my questions in the chat. If someone want to answer me on these questions as well, and because in previous meetings, I also came, to attend this, and the similar questions that what is exactly our role as a non-profit organization in this initiative, because here now we are almost handling 4 major initiatives under 2-3 organizations. So what is our role when we are going to enter in this initiative, first of all? And what are the tips and you can say what are the strategies to market this initiative towards grassroots, and how these grassroots beneficiaries, especially women, can extract some benefits from this initiative. So this is my from all this conversation, these are my questions which I want to ask from the team.
Well, there are several answers to your question because there are several organizations represented here. Lloyd, you may want to take the lead as far as answering her question about what you're doing. But let me say, Miriam, that the EdFu Foundation, I put the link there to the chat.
Yes.
So there's actually a
sir.
request. There's a form there where you can describe what you're trying to accomplish and describe ways we
Okay.
might be able to work together. So that's the beginning
Okay.
step of describing what it is you have in mind. And then the EdFu Foundation can reply after evaluating it and move forward from there.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'd like also to make a quick comment, sort of. So what the Global Unity Business Group is trying to do essentially is to create a network of networks. And so that network of networks is the Global Unity Network. So it's a single network of networks. And so from that, we want to create two major networks. So one is the Unity Gardens Network, which is where this conversation began, where we identified all of these gardens as classrooms solutions. So the Climate Smart Victory Gardens, the Victory Forests, the Climate Smart Kitchens, the Wheel of Life Farms, the Spark Learning Centers. And so from there, this is infrastructure that can be built in our communities. These are our nature classrooms. These are the life learning gardens that we wanted to create when we first established the We Energize Global Cooperation Turtle Island. We said, let's educate about life value in the context. Let's do it in the context of a garden classroom. So we've identified 5 different configurations of classrooms: gardens, forests, kitchens, farms, and these bubble buildings, as I call them, the solar roof types of buildings, are regenerative infrastructure. So open source, we call it climate smart regenerative infrastructure. So we want the classroom. So we want to build classrooms in every community, at every school, everywhere in the world. So this is our objective. Spark in the schoolyard, I think was what the PodNet people call it. So we want to build these nature classrooms in our communities, but we need content. What are we delivering? So this is why we created the Unity Learning Network. So we want to connect every school, every university, every college, every grade school, every kindergarten in the world, to connect the teachers, to connect the educators, to teach the kids what it is they need to know to create regenerative communities, and to teach that within the context of the classrooms, of these gardens, these learning gardens.
Yeah.
So,
And so
I
this
think
is what
so,
where we try to
I-
connect with organizations like yours, and the women, I think, are leaders
Okay.
in terms of education and educators.
Yeah. So, and I can share that 2 of our initiatives. One is School of Rural Womanpreneurship, and second, Sustainable Development Goals Academies. Both are in the shape of classrooms inside the you can say in the rural areas, and the project pattern is in terms of classrooms, and we are giving them live learnings over there. So I think so this Unity Gardens project or initiative can be a very, very easily attached with this sort of our already ongoing initiatives, especially related to women's.
Yeah, and the idea of the learning gardens and the learning network, this Global Unity Network, is that we really want practicum. So that means practical, hands-on, get the kids out there with their hands in the dirt, learning how to grow, learning how to do things very hands-on. But we also have the virtual component, the networking component.
Yeah.
And this is actually what Easy Expo and these virtual platforms are for, is to connect all of these classrooms, all of these gardens around the world, to have us talking to each other and learning from each other. Because we in the so-called developed world can learn just as much, perhaps even more, from you in the developing world.
Sure.
As you can learn from us. And I think it's this exchange of ideas and this exchange of knowledge and the very, very low cost, free even, knowledge exchange that we're trying to create this platform to do. So, and I'm seeing James putting up his hand as well. We'll let James speak.
Thank you.
No, I'd like you to stay on because you see, you talk about developing world and we're the developed world and you're developing. You see, speaking historically, when Europeans came here, we were the developed world. We lived for thousands of years with clean water and land. We tended our children, and there were over 100 million people on Turtle Island before the Europeans came. We had great civilizations. They weren't just little teepees and huts that you show on John Wayne movies. We were integrated. And yes, Turtle Island, there is a link I'd like to send everybody on the history or story of Turtle Island, and it does include Mexico right down to Central or Panama. And of course the islands on the side, and it shows that South America is actually part of Europe, the elephant's head. I'll send that to you later, but I lost my train of thought. When it comes down to, I'll get back to you. I do that all the time. Sorry.
No worries. We have time. Kevin, you go right ahead, Kevin.
Yes, where can I start? My interest is in transformative governance, and I'm really excited to have James here today because I have, I should back up and say that I am a grandson of a post-war settler from Scotland, and I was raised as a young boy alongside Tyendinaga Mohawk Reservation, where my childhood friends were Mohawk boys. And I was fortunate to grow up in that environment. And now, as I'm drawn back last year or 2 years ago, I can't remember now, there was an action in Canada that spread across all of Canada, where there's the pipeline project in British Columbia that was being forced through pristine territory, and there was coordination within the Indigenous peoples of Canada, and on behalf of the peoples that were being affected by this pipeline installation in British Columbia, other nations within so-called Canada, they bonded together and they showed an action of support for what was happening in the Wet'suwet'en. And there was an action that started in Mohawk territory where a couple locations of railway, there was gatherings started by Indigenous peoples, and it effectively shut down the railway system across Canada for 3 weeks in what was Canada's largest nonviolent disruptive action. And I, sitting in my household, very aware of climate science and very connected to Indigenous rights and solidarity and global consciousness, I sat and I watched this railway action unfold and saw with my own eyes that the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation was allowing the narrative from the oil-rich and oil dependent economy of Western Canada, they allowed politicians from that region airtime to effectively start driving division between non-Indigenous Canadians and the Indigenous community. And as I sat and I watched the this politician essentially unfold this narrative that was going to drive a wedge in between these people, I was drawn by something to go back to my community. And I was at the tracks, the closest track location to where I grew up as a child. And for the first time ever, I presented myself as an ally and joined my childhood community as a stranger. And from that day onward, I've been really interested in the transformative governance and the transformative relationships that we're going to have to create internationally on the backside of what we're experiencing. You know, and I remember, and I'm very, very humbled by the fact that I know that I don't know anything when it comes to what I need to know in relation to Indigenous law and Indigenous ways. But I just know that, you know, there is a transformation, a global rise in consciousness. And consciousness has no reverse, it has no rewind. So we need to look forward. And I think that I'm a firm believer that Indigenous tradition of a transformative governance model. And I'm actively in the process of working with Indigenous counselors to help me develop this idea together. So sorry, I'm a little off track as well, but I just wanted to say that this transformative governance is pre-colonial in nature. Right. And if you recognize lately, there's been out of climate action and global climate narrative, there has been a growing number of people around the world that are committed to climate action, and governance is looking to shift. And out of the UK, recently, there was a new political party that was started that was really intriguing, in that it was called Burning Pink, and its primary campaign policy, and it was Valerie Brown, a woman born in Ghana that is now living in London, England. And she ran as the member of Burning Pink as the mayor of London. And that single campaign policy was to implement a citizens' assembly as the decision process within her party. And all this is happening right at the same time where I'm learning about Indigenous democracy, and the fact that Indigenous democracy is also pre-colonial, and the fact that there's a pre-colonial narrative out there in the world right now talking about putting power back in the hands of the people. And this is being driven by people within a continent that have no idea that there was pre-colonial democracy in Turtle Island as well. And I'm envisioning the fact that, you know, a transformative governance can be built on a cornerstone foundation of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Great Law of Peace as a potential foundation of building block, cornerstone building block of this foundation, because it's historical governance, pre-contact, pre-colonial democracy. And then there's the pre-contact, pre-colonial democracy of the Citizens' Assembly from Greek era as two cornerstones working together, and two historical cornerstones with two new cornerstones, one of them being neighborocracy, which is out of India. Its foundation started out of India, which is essentially neighborhood parliaments that are created and engage youth within community governance. As a third cornerstone of this new transformative philosophy, and its fourth cornerstone would be technology. What we all share ourselves today on our screen is the technology to be able to execute the scalable decision-making processes that will be necessary as we move forward. So we have pre-colonial philosophy and democracy and, as two cornerstones, and we have two new cornerstones, which is the technology to make it happen and the inclusion of youth as seen within a neighborocracy system. I'm working on a project right now of that idea that will be presented to COP26 in conjunction with neighborocracy. Thanks for listening. I yield.
Well, everything you said was very relevant, and I do want to, all right, James, I'll get to you just 1 second. What I want to ask is that if anyone here knows any youth that are interested in these kind of topics, that we invite them here, not just as participants, but also perhaps as interns, and perhaps I could even manage to provide them with work study credits through either the EdFu Foundation or through the 5 Points Youth Foundation, because it's the youth, in fact, that we're all doing this for. And they need to be sitting here with us having these conversations, because it's the youth that has to drive the narrative for the reality that they're going to live with, not just the ones that they're stuck with. So James, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Yes, I will touch base with a few of our peoples. We have a lot of very angry youth that need an outlet. Just a comment on Kevin there. Funny you talk about the burning pink party, because the grandmother of Lady Diane Spencer, she was known as the Pink Lady. And as for the oil barons out in the western part of so-called Canada being given airtime, again, it relates back to the fact is the idea of the trust funds. When the trust fund was set up, it was divided into three. One was to the benefits of land and water would go to the colonists, the colonials, the ones that came from Europe and such. 1/3 would go to the indigenous people, the Indians, and 1/3 would go to the crown of England. The balance of that, of those proceeds, would go to the trustee that they would appoint to manage the proceeds, not indoctrinate policy and law, but to manage the proceeds. The actions that you talk about, allowing them airtime, shows that when you got a prime minister who is both the so-called prime minister of Canada, which is still a colony, yes, it's still a colony, and he's on the he sits as the trustee of the Indian Trust. That's a conflict of interest that's been there for a very, very long time. So it's about time we removed the trustee, and in this case here, even remove the executor, because the executor is the present reigning monarchs of the Crown of England. Why? Through hereditary title. But they've abused it for so long that they need to be taken out and a new executor put in place. Now, Canada is broke. And I'll describe it to you, because World War I, there was a letter that went back that they needed funds to fight the war and they didn't have more money. They said, we do have another fund we can tap into. It was our fund. When McGill University was built, they used our funds. When a location called the Welland Canal system, Lake Erie and Lake Ontario region was developed, they used our funds. Not only have we not seen any interest on that money, we haven't even seen money returned. So your so-called prime minister is definitely biased. In that case, he has to remove himself as trustee of the Indian Trust Fund. This can all be put down on paper. As a matter of fact, it is on paper, okay? And it can be authenticated. Now, a lot of the papers we had in our possession and do have are not the result of hard work, but by chance, because a lot of our documents were destroyed by the previous Prime Minister of Canada, who had them shredded before he left office. But someone in the office got a hold of a lot of documents and saved them. So the evidence we need is still sitting within the archives of Buckingham Palace. And if you look at the letters and the decrees from Queen Anne, you see that what I'm saying, it is true. I don't need to tell stories. The truth will bear me out. So when you look at all that's going on, and that's just here, and when I hear about trying to have you aborted at birth, your mother really must have loved you a lot. That's all I can say. In my case, my grandmother was adopted by white people at about the age of 2 or 3. And it wasn't until I was 39 years old that I found out that I was Chippewa. It was hidden so that we wouldn't have to be part of the residential school system and all the dogma that went with being an Indian. So she must have actually loved her children. But this is happening all over the world. And it's time to stop being ashamed of it and to promote it as being, how dare you do this to us? And Africa is no different. Okay, I mean, I'd love to be able to work with the people there. The food's great, and the celebration of life, and to have a community where they smile all the time. I've never seen more drone faces in my life than the area called Canada and America and the United States. Because in a lot of the countries I've gone to, the people are always smiling. They say, well, that's why we don't have cancer. That's why we live longer. We just take each day as it comes and we smile about it. Nothing we can do, so we just continue on with what we have. And they're happy. Why can't they be happy here? Why do they have to have more and more and more? Why? Because there's a greater evil out there. Some agree with me, many don't. But there's a greater evil out there, and it wants the world. Kwame.
Well, thanks so much for sharing that. As I said, as soon as next week, perhaps we'll have Princess Sheppy from the Batloqua Federation here, and the issues that they're facing after what they call apartheid in South Africa in particular brings us right back to where you are there in Canada. But I'm also part of the several groups and organizations. I had the opportunity to meet John T. Moss some years ago, an Indigenous representative, and I was able to connect him with another one of my friends, Herschel Daniels. So their organizations actually met together back in 2015, and they addressed the issue that we have here in America, particularly between the African Americans and the Indigenous people. So technically, I'm bringing together nations or people representing nations, James, so we can address these issues together in a unified front. So thank you so much for sharing that. I'll turn the floor back over to anyone else. We have about 10 minutes left. There's no hard and fast rule here, but the idea is that I'll provide you a recording of this. Also, we need to think about what we're going to do after this. Now, the Ed Fu Foundation is providing this platform for us for the next year. And I think it's important that we look forward to ways that we can take better advantage of what we have here. I would love to have, again, some youth to be involved with editing these sessions that we're having. James, for example, I'll do my best after this to see if I can pull it together, but I know I need help. But the idea is that the issues that we discuss here, they can actually be put onto an ecosystem that's much more robust than this Zoom meeting. So in the chat there, I put in a link to the Easy Expo platform. This is technically part of a ecosystem that will allow there to be continuing chats. Each one of you will be granted a booth, a virtual booth, so people can contact you directly and we can plan for it from there. That's one aspect. And below there, I put in a link to vcom.biz. They also provide a 3D collaborative platform where we can take advantage of these opportunities. It's true what you say, James. Communications is critically important, but we are in what they call the fourth industrial revolution, all right? We're not going backwards. So we have tools at our fingertips now that can help us reach a wider audience. Also, the United Nations itself, they formed the Indigenous Peoples Forum. They're having meetings there this week. And so the things you're talking about, James, they need a wider audience than just the people on the link here. But the idea is to take these issues to people that are sitting at the table so they can open the door for us to be at the table. My own grandfather, he himself was from Ireland. My grandmother was a Creek Indian. So the reality is that we're all in this together. So any of my resources are available to everyone here to do what we need to get done to move this forward. Thank you.
Yeah, I can volunteer to do some editing.
Okay, wonderful. I'll share with everyone here the links, and also I'll share with you the download link so you can actually have access to it. So yes, also, as I said, the idea is for each of us to have a virtual booth, a kind of virtual space where we work with. But let me say to you point blank, Fule, that one of my close friends is from Cameroon.
Okay.
They're here in Los Angeles. They have it's called the Immigrant Magazine. So I'll connect you together because it's important for us to cross the boundaries of what they call the diaspora, because the diaspora just means people that are from a particular country that now are in another country. But the reality is that we're all connected together. So the stronger we can build those ties together, I think the stronger we can be going forward.
Right. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
And likewise, I would like to reiterate and mention again that I did work with the Climate Smart Agriculture Youth Network, which was also founded and created in Cameroon. So Divine, Diokam, as his name is. I love his name because his name is Divine and he is divine. He is the founder and chairperson of the the Climate Smart Agriculture Youth Network, and I want to connect Wale to Divine and to Andrew's networks in Los Angeles and across, especially, and I think right now, the Francophonie is actually a very powerful portal to having these conversations. Because I think Quebec has its own culture. Quebec people have a unique perspective in North America, Turtle Island. And they are members as well of the Francophonie. And that's why Canada is a member of the Francophonie. And Cameroon is actually a member of both the Francophonie and the Commonwealth of Nations.
Right.
Just like Canada, but Canada is the only G20 country that's a member of both of those organizations. So Cameroon is really critical, and it connect us to some of these larger networks, especially in particular the global climate facilities for financing climate solutions, which is actually run by the people in South Korea. And lo and behold, when I looked at their website, you will find that one of the members of this global finance facility that's being set up by the South Koreans to finance solutions to climate change has membership not from the Commonwealth, but it has membership from the Francophonie.
Okay.
So if we can connect your work in Montreal to Divine's work with the Climate Smart Agricultural Youth Network, and Andrew's work with his people in Los Angeles who are from Cameroon, let's connect to the Francophonie, let's connect to the financial system that's being set up that wants to raise $100 billion a year to finance solutions to climate change. This is the topic now at the G7. How do we finance action in climate? This is the conversation. How do we get women involved in this recovery, this global economic recovery? This is the conversations they're having in the UK right now. So if we can connect our youth to the finance, to the solutions, to the educators. So this is the ecosystem we're building. So this is what Drawdown Markham did, is create the 7-sector model of community engagement. So we took the public-private partnership thing that governments typically do, PPPs, and we said we brought it to a 4-sector, a 5-sector, a 6-sector, now a 7-sector model of partnership, so what we call now the AHIABGA matrix partnership, where we're bringing every voice in our community together at the local level to have discussions around solutions, including, of course, the youth and the women and the faith communities, all of these, and the finance. Everybody coming together to say, look, here's the solution. How do we actually implement this? And this is the idea around the victory pandemic, local teams or local teams that are connected to each other through the gardens.
So Fule, it looks like you have your hands full, but we'd like to give you tools to work with as well. So for today, if I could impose upon you to be the person that jots down the action plans for what the outcomes are. And let's start with you. Let's start with you and Lloyd. Let's start with the team in Cameroon. Let's start with that. And James, if you would be so kind as to choose to give us an outline, a plan of action for things that you'd like us to do for next week and forever. Same thing with you, Kevin, and everyone else. The idea is for us to pull together our resources and make this, again, a documentary that's a living invitation to everyone else to join us. So I would like to extend that request to everyone here.
Noted. I'll do that.
Now you can, if you're at a computer, you can click on the chat on the right-hand side. There's three little dots where you can save this chat, and that will give you information about anyone that's typed in anything here. So we can then follow up from there. And what we also have a WhatsApp group. So Lloyd, perhaps we can activate our WhatsApp group for this follow-up team, or just add to the existing team we have for Global Unity, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, thank you very much for hosting this event. I'm seeing it's 12:59 on my clock. Thank you all. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Pule. Thank you, James and Tasnim and Odele. I wasn't sure if I would actually be able to do this in the such limited time. We actually just made this choice to do this and go ahead only like 3 days ago. But it is something I think that was very, very important to me because our first event when we did the Sunlight Spectacle 2020 event was Africa to Asia, and this was supposed to be today Canada to the world, but I think it's Turtle Island to the world. And Prince Andrew reminded me of that just yesterday. This is Turtle Island to the world, voices of Turtle Island, but also listening, not just broadcasting. So it's the exchange and it's the creation of these global networks, and I hope this will result ultimately in the coming together of all Indigenous peoples around the world in a network of dialogue and action toward not just achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, but achieving the ultimate goal of peace on earth, that is the epitome of what the original Millennium Development Goals was trying to do. Hopefully we can do it in a lot less than 1,000 years.
Well, I certainly hope so, but the thing about it is that we have to take every day and move forward, move the needle forward. So in the link, I've also put there that, excuse me, as I mentioned to you, I was inducted as a prince, but surprisingly enough, the people that inducted me were also members like Lloyd of my global ambassador team. And they too have agreed to support this initiative to work together to bring in the royals and the Indigenous people. So I do look forward to finding ways we can bring this home to all the 3,000 tribes in Africa, along with our tribes on Turtle Island, because that's the world. We are the world. Okay, time for any closing thoughts.
I'd just like to mention one more thing is about Asia. I learned recently that there are more Indigenous people and more Indigenous communities in Asia than all the rest of the world combined. I don't think there's a number put it to it, but it's probably in the tens of thousands. So that connection, I think, is very vital as well. And I see Jim is putting up his hand, and since he is our guest of honor today, I think maybe we'll go ahead with Fule first with a few words, and then back to Jim for final closing remarks.
Please, I just want to find out if we'll have access to the recording.
Yes, I'll send it out to everyone here.
Thank you.
And please, if you can join our WhatsApp group, I'll put it there as well. But if I have
Great.
your email address in the chat, I'll send it out to you. Matter of fact, I'll send it to Lloyd. He seems to be the connector here, so we'll all have it.
Thank you.
All right, Jim, the floor is yours.
Thank you. One thing, Lloyd, Asians in general, they're all Aboriginals. China's been around for how long? The Arabs are Aboriginals. The colonials are the ones that tried to divide all of us and to turn it into us into them. When they took over in Cyprus, they really messed up a beautiful country there. And now they're trying to get back to being part of Africa. When they murdered Gaddafi, yes, murdered Gaddafi, The first thing that came into place was the European Bank, Rothschild's Bank. The idea of giving people free loans to build their homes became interest-bearing loan. So this is the things we're against. It's not something that we want to talk about, but somebody has to, because it's like you got to cut out the cancer, and there's only one way to do it. You got to take a knife and cut it out. So you can talk all you want about it, but you've got to get down there and do the work. So yeah, maybe my uncle's model might help here, and I hope it doesn't offend anyone. He would say, hang all the thieving bastards.
Well, it's interesting you say that. There's a movie out now called Exterminate All the Brutes, or Eliminate the Brutes, right? And it talks about the colonial history that we're faced with right now. It was done by someone from Haiti, of all places. And so, yes, Jim, we're all connected together. And if it's up to us to do it, there's no one else but us. So I'm just willing for us to do it. Let's do it. I'm ready.
So I guess, thank you very much, James and Andrew, and everybody for coming on this call, taking the time out of your day to come together in this dialogue. Please also, as Andrew mentioned, join the Easy Expo portal. We'll set up your own place where you can disseminate virtually your voice, your message to others around the world, and we can connect people virtually as well, not just in these one-off events, but actually permanently 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, where you'll have that landing spot for yourself to be able to share with others.
Okay, well, I'm going to stop the recording. I'm not going to end the meeting. I am going to stop the recording just briefly. I do want to see if I can do a little editing chore here and end up with the same image I began with. Let's see if I can share my screen. Just a moment. Okay. Looks like I've changed my screen. So I'm going to leave it like that. I'm going to stop the recording now. Thanks everyone for joining us. We'll be here every Thursday morning, 8 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you can join us on Facebook at the Encounter AHIABGA group, or you can reach me, Andrew Williams Jr., Andrew Williams Jr. 777@gmail.com. WhatsApp +1 213 274 3675. Or LinkedIn, Andrew Williams Jr., Facebook, Andrew Williams Jr. And so thank you so much. I'm going to end this recording now, but I'm not going to end the meeting. So hold on just one moment, please.